Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we are taking a seriously gripping, viral true crime story and using it to decode the incredibly complex legal frameworks that actually govern human morality. We're talking about a jaw-dropping tale of deep betrayal, long-held personal vendettas, and the very strict rules of professional legal ethics. It's going to be a wild ride, so let's get into it. Okay, let's just dive right into this explosive realization. This quote comes directly from a highly successful businesswoman who spent 4 full years of her marriage secretly listening to her husband and his family plot her absolute destruction. They spoke entirely in a language he assumed she didn't know, but instead of confronting him right then and there, she played dumb. She smiled and she listened as he and a lawyer friend crafted a calculated plan to completely steal her business empire. I mean, talk about playing the long game. This chilling story maps out a 27-year grudge. It literally started with a petty childhood insult over torn shoes when they were just 9 years old. Fast forward to age 32, they reunite. He sees her massive success, totally charms her, and marries her. But by year 1 of their marriage, she overhears his true motive. He married her purely for revenge and to siphon away her hard-earned properties. And by year 4, well, she springs a pretty massive trap of her own. So, as the husband and his lawyer friend begin formulating their highly illegal plan to frame her for money laundering to seize her assets, we really have to pause. How far would you go for a 27-year-old grudge? And more importantly, for our analysis today, how does the law actually define and measure the morality of these highly calculated, deceptive actions? Section 1. Good moral character. The baseline of legal ethics. You know, before a lawyer can even practice law, draft a single contract, or step foot inside a courtroom, institutions like the state bar require them to cross a very specific official threshold. They must definitively prove they are a person of good moral character. Now, good moral character isn't just about being a generally nice person who remembers to say please and thank you. It actually demands legally defined critical qualities like honesty, fairness, trustworthiness, and an absolute respect for the law. These are the exact qualities the corrupt lawyer in our story completely tossed out the window when he agreed to help frame the wife. But here is a bit of a legal paradox, really. How do you actually prove your morals? You can't just peer into someone's soul, right? Because character is this internal psychological trait, the burden of proof falls totally on the individual to show a track record of virtuous acts, or at the very least a clean history with zero negative conduct. Moving right along to Section 2, moral turpitude, crossing the line. So, the exact legal opposite of all that good character stuff we just talked about, it's a concept known as moral turpitude. The law uses some intensely heavy language for this, describing it as an act of baseness, vileness, or depravity in the duties a person owes to society. It's an historic legal concept that pops up everywhere from professional licensing to U.S. immigration law, and it severely punishes acts that gravely violate accepted community standards. The defining difference between these two categories really just boils down to evil intent. Minor traffic violations or simple trespassing, those don't qualify. But fraud, embezzlement, and the husband's specific plot to create false import documents and commit extortion, oh yeah, that lands squarely in the category of moral turpitude. Which brings us to Section 3, legal ethics gone wrong, the corrupt lawyer. Let's talk about the husband's accomplice for a second, the lawyer friend who literally sat in the wife's living room and agreed to frame her with the Economic and Organized Crime Office for a 30% cut of her properties. Legal ethics dictate incredibly strict principles of conduct. A lawyer has dual duties, right? They have duties to the client, like confidentiality, but they also have duties to the court, like absolute truthfulness. By engineering fake discrepancies to mimic money laundering, this lawyer fundamentally violated his core duty of candor toward the tribunal. He used his specialized legal knowledge not to uphold justice, but to actively subvert it. And because our entire legal system relies so heavily on the integrity of its officers, the penalties for this kind of severe misconduct are absolute. An attorney caught conspiring to commit fraud and extortion isn't just facing standard criminal charges. They face total disbarment. That means the complete, irreversible loss of their license to practice law forever. Let's pivot slightly to Section 4, the Morals Clause, contracting good behavior. We've seen how state institutions enforce morality, but how do private companies handle this kind of thing? Well, they use what is known as a Morals Clause. Emerging right after the infamous 1921 fatty arbuckle scandal, film studios and corporate sponsors began forcing their talent to legally promise they wouldn't shock, insult, or offend the community. Essentially, a party is quite literally purchasing the other party's good name and reputation. It is just wild to see how early and specifically this started. Just think about baseball legend Babe Ruth's 1922 contract. The Yankees owner literally tried to legally contract him into becoming a person of good moral character. They demanded he abstain from intoxicating liquors and not stay up past 1 a.m. It really highlights how desperately society tries to bind and control human behavior through legal instruments. All right, Section 5. Justice or Revenge? The climax. Okay, so now that we are thoroughly equipped with a solid understanding of these legal boundaries, we've got to return to our story. It's time for the wife to finally spring her trap, because instead of confronting him privately, she spent months acting like a literal spy in her own home. First, she quietly transferred her major assets to a trust, totally out of his reach. Second, she planted hidden recording devices all around the house to capture the conspiracy in high-definition audio. Finally, she invited both of their families to a big anniversary party, locked the doors, and played the audio publicly for everyone to hear. And guys, the trap worked flawlessly. She actually had the police waiting at the back of the room. This resulted in immediate police intervention, and both the husband and his lawyer are now facing severe criminal charges of moral turpitude, specifically conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted extortion. That carries a potential 5 to 10 years in prison. But taking a step back and looking at the aftermath impartially, things are in a bit of a gray area now. Her own family is deeply divided on her actions. Some view her as this brilliant, calculating survivor, but others, actually including her own mother, argue that her prolonged deception, recording private conversations without consent for 4 years, and her intense desire for brutal public humiliation crossed the line from simply seeking justice into pure, unadulterated vengeance. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Based on the strict legal definitions of good moral character and moral turpitude we've just explored together, we leave it to you to judge. Were her deceptive actions over those 4 long years a righteous, necessary defense of her life and property? Or was it a descent into the very darkness she was fighting against? Think about it. Let that sink in, and we will see you in the next explainer.